A woman who sets boundaries becomes a woman whose presence instantly feels valuable because she isn't giving her time away like spare change. She's offering it with intention. And she understands that her energy is a currency, and anyone wanting access must show consistency to earn more of it. And a man quickly senses when a woman respects herself, and it shifts how he approaches her, because now he knows effort matters. And she is not afraid to communicate what she needs or what she won't tolerate. And she does it calmly instead of aggressively. And her boundaries become a quiet but powerful message that she chooses who gets close to her, not the other way around. And that choice is what makes men admire her, because admiration is born from scarcity and standards. And when she says no to something that compromises her peace, she's saying yes to herself, worth, and men feel that difference instantly. And she becomes the woman who doesn't chase love to feel enough, but invites love from a place of confidence. And this centered energy creates magnetic attraction because men are drawn to a woman who chooses herself first. And in choosing herself, she becomes someone no man ever takes for granted. And when a woman has strong boundaries, she naturally stops giving attention to men who offer inconsistency, and this filters out unworthy connections before they even begin. And a man who was only looking for convenience quietly walks away. And that's a blessing, not a loss. And the man who stays is the one who respects that her standards are not negotiable, and he adjusts his behavior to match them. And he begins to see her as someone rare in a world where many people bend too quickly for fear of losing affection. And her boundaries make him rise not because she forces him to, but because she inspires him to show up better. And this builds authentic connection, not one built on insecurity or overgiving, and it becomes something he wants to protect. And her ability to say what she needs without apologizing becomes a guide for how he treats her every day. And she is not difficult, she is clear, and clarity is more attractive than chaos will ever be. And he feels safe with her because he knows where he stands, and men crave that emotional certainty more than they admit. And in that safety, he becomes more expressive, more invested, and more intentional with her. And boundaries shift how a woman moves in relationships because she stops prioritizing fear and starts prioritizing alignment. And she no longer feels the pressure to prove her worth because her boundaries already communicate it without her saying a word. And a man sees that she won't sacrifice her dignity for temporary attention, and that realization makes him treat her differently. And she becomes the type of woman he thinks about long after she leaves the room, because depth always lingers. And her standards create space for him to show his intentions through actions, not just words, and that deepens the connection. And he begins to pursue her not because she is hard to get, but because she is hard to replace, and that distinction is everything. And her presence becomes a privilege, not an entitlement, and he feels honored to be part of her world. And her boundaries remind him that love is not something to rush. It is something to build with care and respect. And through her strength, she teaches him how to value her and how to value the relationship they're creating together. And in that dynamic, she becomes unforgettable, not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. When a woman sets strong boundaries, she naturally becomes more mysterious because her life doesn't revolve around constant approval or attention. And she isn't trying to prove her worth through over-explaining or overgiving. And that creates an irresistible sense of confidence. And a man feels this difference immediately because she doesn't jump at every message or rearrange her entire day just to accommodate him. And she responds from a place of intention rather than urgency, and that subtle shift makes him lean in closer. And mystery isn't created by playing games. It's created by having a life that is already full and meaningful without him. And her boundaries protect her from falling into emotional overinvestment too soon, which keeps the connection healthy and balanced. And the less she forces things, the more naturally he becomes drawn to understanding her deeper layers. And he starts wondering what she's doing, who she's becoming, and what goals she's chasing, because she isn't always available. And that curiosity fuels attraction, because desire grows strongest in the space where independence and interest meet. And in that space, she becomes unforgettable because her presence feels like something he must earn. And when a woman knows how to hold her center, a man notices how she doesn't give unlimited access to someone who hasn't proven consistency. And she respects her boundaries enough to say no to late-night messages, unclear intentions, or breadcrumb communication. And instead of proving that she's loyal, she watches how he shows up when she doesn't give him everything at once. And this inspires him to be more deliberate, because now he understands that her attention isn't something he can assume. And he puts effort into planning, communicating, and showing respect, because he sees she won't settle for half-hearted connection. And her mystery isn't about hiding who she is. It's about revealing herself slowly to someone who earns deeper access. And this measured pace builds excitement, tension, and curiosity, which naturally intensify the bond over time. And men love the feeling of discovering a woman layer by layer, rather than being handed everything immediately. And her boundaries create that discovery, turning the connection into something he actively participates in. And participation increases emotional investment, because people commit more deeply to what they work for. And a woman with boundaries communicates through her actions that she has emotional independence, and this independence becomes magnetic. And she can enjoy his presence without depending on it, and that confidence makes her stand out in a world full of attachment-based behavior. And a man becomes more drawn to her because she isn't trying to control the relationship or rush the pace to feel secure. And she allows things to unfold naturally while still protecting her dignity and emotional well-being. And her life remains full of her passions, friendships, responsibilities, and dreams, and that keeps her grounded no matter who enters her world. And a man respects a woman who doesn't lose herself for love, because it shows strength, maturity, and emotional balance. And he starts to view her not as an option, but as a priority, because she feels like a woman who brings depth and stability. And the mystery she carries isn't about distance. It's about intention, value, and inner clarity. And in that clarity, she becomes the woman he wants to pursue, understand, and invest in fully, because she makes connection feel meaningful. And through her boundaries, she becomes someone he feels lucky to get closer to with every step he earns. A man cannot treat a woman better than the standard she sets, and boundaries become unspoken rules that guide his behavior from the start. And when she clearly communicates what she needs emotionally, mentally, and physically, she gives him the blueprint for how to show up. And she doesn't expect him to guess or read her mind. She teaches him through calm clarity instead of silent resentment. And this makes the relationship healthier because he knows exactly what makes her feel valued and what crosses the line. And boundaries prevent mixed signals, emotional confusion, and unmet expectations that often lead to frustration and distance. And a man who respects her listens carefully because her standards show him that she values herself enough to speak up. And he adjusts his actions not out of fear, but out of genuine desire to keep the connection strong. And her confidence in expressing her needs inspires him to become more intentional and emotionally aware. And he begins to appreciate her honesty because it sets both of them up for a stronger, more secure connection. And she becomes the woman he can trust because she chooses truth over passive acceptance. And when a woman upholds her boundaries, she stops rewarding inconsistent behavior, and this teaches a man what she will and won't accept. And instead of giving second chances to patterns that hurt her, she steps back until he proves he can rise to her level. And this teaches him accountability because he learns that effort is required if he wants to be part of her life in a meaningful way. And he realizes that disappearing, breadcrumbing, or emotional laziness won't get him anywhere near her heart. And her boundaries show him that she values depth, consistency, and emotional presence more than temporary attention. And the men who are not serious naturally eliminate themselves, which protects her from heartbreak and wasted time. And the man who stays becomes more invested because he's choosing her through effort, not convenience. And he begins to show up with actions that match his words because he knows she won't settle for anything less. And this creates a relationship where respect grows stronger with each choice he makes to honor her needs. And in honoring her needs, he learns how to honor the relationship they're building together. And a woman who teaches a man how to treat her through boundaries creates a dynamic built on mutual respect rather than silent sacrifice. And she stops taking responsibility for his emotional maturity and instead shows him what emotionally mature behavior looks like. And her boundaries encourage him to communicate better because he understands that healthy connection requires participation from both sides. And he becomes more aware of his own patterns and starts choosing behaviors that strengthen the relationship instead of weakening it. And she shows him that love grows through consistency, honesty, and intentional actions, not through pressure or fear of loss. And a man feels more secure with a woman who is clear, because clarity removes the anxiety that usually comes from guessing. And this emotional security allows him to open up more and express himself without feeling judged or pushed. And her boundaries become the foundation for emotional safety, which is something men crave more deeply than they admit. And over time, he begins to value her guidance, her strength, and her willingness to teach him how to love her properly. And through this, she becomes the woman who elevates him while also elevating the connection they share. Most women fear setting strong boundaries because they think it will push a man away, but the truth is, boundaries make them irreplaceable, and a woman who honors her standards communicates that she cannot be taken for granted, and that rarity immediately increases her value. And she doesn't bend to fit every whim or compromise her emotional needs for temporary attention or validation. And instead, she chooses what aligns with her dignity and self-respect, and that selective energy draws men in naturally. And men are instinctively attracted to women whose presence feels like a privilege rather than an entitlement. And her boundaries create a sense of scarcity, not because she plays games, but because she knows her worth. And the men who truly want her must rise to her level, and that challenge makes the connection more meaningful. And she becomes someone who cannot be replaced by convenience, charm, or fleeting attention, because she stands firm in herself. And her confidence signals to him that she will not settle for less than she deserves, and that certainty is magnetic. And through this strength, she creates a presence that lingers in his mind long after she is gone. And a woman with firm boundaries stops chasing approval and starts living life on her own terms, and that shift changes everything. And she no longer fears saying no, because every no is a yes to her value and emotional health. And her energy is focused on her passions, goals, and growth, which makes her attractive in ways words cannot convey. And men notice when a woman is self-directed because it communicates independence, purpose, and strength. And her boundaries teach him that emotional availability must be earned, not assumed, and that realization sparks deeper attraction. And he begins to invest more intentionally because she doesn't give her attention freely to those who don't deserve it. And she stops tolerating disrespect, inconsistency, or half-hearted efforts, which automatically filters out anyone unworthy. And her standards set the pace and tone of the relationship, and he learns to adjust his behavior accordingly. And this creates a dynamic where he actively chooses her, instead of passively receiving her presence. And her ability to remain unwavering in her worth makes her unforgettable because few women exhibit this clarity. And the more a woman maintains her boundaries, the more she becomes someone a man cannot imagine living without, because she sets the standard for how love should feel. And she communicates through her actions that respect, effort, and consistency are non-negotiable, and he quickly internalizes this truth. And men are drawn to women who teach them how to show up, because it elevates the connection beyond superficial attraction. And her boundaries prevent emotional chaos and bring clarity to the relationship, making him feel secure and challenged at the same time. And she doesn't need to compete, chase, or compromise her values, which positions her as someone rare in a world of uncertainty. And by honoring herself first, she shows him how to honor her, and he begins to mirror that behavior naturally. And her presence becomes something he treasures, not because she demands it, but because she embodies self-respect consistently. And she becomes irreplaceable not through manipulation, but through her unwavering standards and emotional intelligence. And her strength and clarity make her magnetic, because she demonstrates that true connection requires intention and effort. And in that intentionality, she transforms into the kind of woman every man remembers and respects.